play the guitar a little bit.
Yeah. Whoa.
That should be good.
Come on now. That's what I mean. Give me that for you. Motherfucking yeah.
So do you want like a to line up your sound?
Yeah, we're gonna need to do that.
Okay.
Sure.
What are the vocabulary and the tools that I can use to come across not aggressive or not passive, but just being? How can I come across as myself to another human being, like Malcolm Gladwell in his new book, Talking to Strangers? How can I come across to a stranger without coming across like I'm trying with ego or coming across with trying to intimidate or belittle or critique or criticize? How can I come across to someone with just acceptance?
Does Malcolm Gladwell say that you should start a podcast? Because that's my trick.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't.
I think he has a podcast, actually.
I think he does too. I just haven't listened to it yet.
A podcast is primarily an excuse to talk to people, especially this podcast, and especially lately. In fact, sometimes, when I talk to somebody and then I don't put an episode out for several months, I wonder if they wonder if the microphone was even recording. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing that podcasts are like this. Everybody should have a podcast for exactly this reason. How often do you get to sit down and have a long conversation with a friend? What about a long conversation with a person that you don't know very well but admire and want to know more about? Not very often, right? I think it would strengthen a lot of relationships if everybody had a podcast. It wouldn't be enough. It's still not enough for me. There's never enough time. There's always more people. There's still friends in my life that I feel like I'm neglecting, people that I worry I'm letting down somehow by not keeping in better touch. A podcast doesn't really fix that. But again, if everybody did start a podcast, I wouldn't have to always stay actively in touch with everyone in my life. I could passively download their brains once a week or once a month or whatever and climb briefly inside their heads. And when we did manage to see each other, I'd be on great footing because I'd already know a lot about what they'd been doing and thinking about lately. I guess maybe we'd have nothing new to talk about.
It isn't about that.
Okay, so not everyone should start a podcast, but if you're thinking about doing it, you should. Especially because big corporate interests are finally starting to find ways to wall this off, to de-democratize it, take it away from us, and sell it back to us in a less interesting form. If you're listening to this and you also subscribe to Luminary or really any of those other exclusively monetized podcast apps, maybe don't do that. I mean, if you really got to hear all those Earwolf exclusives, I forgive you, but you're part of the problem. That's another reason that everybody should start a podcast, though. It'll be harder for them to take it away from us if we're all holding a piece of it. Strength in numbers. And it's in that spirit, strength in numbers, and the fervent hope that everybody will someday have an independent podcast of their own. It's in that spirit that we take today's episode to highlight a few of the shows created by people that you've heard of on previous episodes of the last podcast. At this point, there are quite a few. I've been waiting for it to happen. Since the start of the show, guests have gone off and started their own podcasts, but just like any small business, not many of them stick. But then, they started to. Slowly and surely, we built up a critical mass of associated shows, and I trust that you understand the significance of that. The last podcast has a goddamn cinematic universe. That is very exciting. Now, it's one that I can only take partial credit for. I mean, I started a podcast because John Pernisek had one, so he's like the Iron Man of this cinematic universe. I don't want to necessarily say that I'm Captain America, but yeah, I'm Captain America. Anyway, today, we are going to explore that extended universe. We're going to see some familiar characters in new settings, and maybe you'll find a new favorite podcast. Maybe you'll just download the episodes that I appear on and give them the old Zach Little boost. I don't know if the Zach Little boost really exists, but I'd like to think that it does.
Willkommen, bienvenue, and welcome to The Musical Man, the podcast that shines new light on the Tony Award for Best Musical. Each week we examine the nominees and winners of that esteemed decoration, and this week we will be discussing Ain't Misbehavin'.
John Pernisek is the godfather of this show. Back in the day, he was a co-host of a podcast called Cough Syrup, and I used to send in audio clips. Just dumb greetings to him and the other host, Michael Stone.
Cough syrup. Oh my god, hi.
And from there, I kind of got the bug. I was so used to creating visually, but I was getting bored by it, and audio was this shiny new path. And John provided a lot of advice on how to get started. By then, he was on to his second podcast, How Rude, which was, naturally, about the show Full House.
Hello, and welcome to How Rude, an exhaustive deconstruction of the classic 90s sitcom Full House. I am one of your co-hosts, basketball star Brandon Shockney, and to my immediate left is promising up-and-comer John Pernisek. Say hi, John.
You spit on me.
Why are you yelling so loud?
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't introduced you yet.
Your introductions have become increasingly...
I'm going to make sure people can hear me.
On an episode of this podcast, we actually talked about his third project, At the Trailers, which was a show about movie trailers. I got to contribute some of the theme music for that show, and it was really fun to be able to contribute in that way. I love making my garbage music, and I was very pleased that somebody else wanted it. So they would use this whenever they were going to talk about movie snacks, which... You know, it's kind of long just to introduce a segment, right? I actually thought it was going to be the show's overall theme music. Otherwise, I would have made it much shorter. Later, when John wanted another clip to introduce their From the Vault segment, I learned to be brief. I'm playing these music clips because they're the only clips I have from At the Trailers because it is no longer online.
For those who may not be familiar, my friend Brandon Shockney and I had a podcast called At the Trailers, which was a weekly review show. It reviewed any and all movie trailers that came out within a given week. And the moment where it all ended involved Brandon deciding to move from Chicago to Ohio, which was a plan that he had been turning over a few times, and then he had sort of tucked it away. And I kind of assumed that it was maybe no longer an option. But then I was told that not only was it an option, it was an option he was exercising, and he had made a lot of plans, a lot of headway, a lot of legwork had been done to make sure that it would happen. So the show had to come to an end fairly quickly. But thankfully, the nice thing about it coming to an end so quickly is that we at least had an ending. I really get frustrated when shows just stop when they have a trajectory and they don't respect the listener enough to just at least provide some sort of cursory, farewell episode, some sort of goodbye message. So we, at the very least, were able to do that, which I'm happy for in hindsight.
How many other promising podcasts have we lost to Ohio? The Hawkeye State, where podcasts go to die. Or is Ohio the Hoosier State? I'll be honest, I'm kind of spiraling right now because the whole reason that I asked John about the end of his podcast is because I have a totally different and much wilder memory of how it all went down, which was that John's co-host literally called him from a moving truck to tell him that he was skipping town and the show was over, and that he put off telling John until the last minute because he was afraid of upsetting him. Looking back in my email, I'm realizing that all of this stemmed from me slightly misreading one sentence in an email from John, and I guess filling in the rest of the details from my own imagination. I still think that when someone writes the screenplay version of John's life someday, they should go with my version of the events.
That would have been quite hilarious and insane. Yeah. I think he told me he was moving about a week before the move was going to happen. So there was definitely very little time to respond to that news. But we were able to I think he went out of his way to a certain extent to make sure that we recorded that final episode, because I think he understood that I would have been quite resentful for who knows how many decades if I had not been able to tie that up neatly with a little ribbon. But yeah, ultimately it was an interesting feeling bringing that to an end, because there was a lot of work that went into it, and for the most part, we really weren't seeing a lot of traction when it came to developing a core audience. So I don't think either of us were super heartbroken about closing that door necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we talked around the time the podcast was starting, you talked about the kind of difficulty of finding an audience this time around, which is funny because to me, movie trailers are like, lots of people like movie trailers, right? It's not as specific a thing as like Full House, or I guess musicals are not, like that's pretty general too. So, and yet somehow it feels more niche. Like, I've always thought that like you aim straight down the middle, then you get a straight down the middle mainstream audience.
Right. Yeah, I've talked about this with my boyfriend Chris so many times, this balance that you can't quite seem to achieve when creating a podcast premise, because you can simultaneously think to yourself, this seems very, niche, this seems very narrow, but at the same time you could convince yourself, you could sort of double back and say, no, but there's a lot of people who like to listen to these things, especially, there are people who are fans of this will be fine. And you sort of convince yourself that it's going to work out for the best. With Full House, I mean, the Full House podcast is still doing inexplicably well. That hasn't produced any new material since 2017. And with the movie trailers podcast, I sort of chalked that up to, okay, this isn't doing well because there are, I'd say, an estimated 18,000 movie podcasts where people are just sort of sitting around and shooting the shit about movies in development, movie news. Like, there's no shortage of white guys who want to sit around and talk about that shit. So I think that's sort of the wall that we ran into. We kind of got lost in the conversation.
Right. Whereas there's maybe, at this point, probably like 5 podcasts about Full House. So like, there's still a lot of room there.
Right. I think they're all dead. We were the only one I think we were the only podcast to go through the entire series, and everyone else chopped off their own legs a half a mile into the journey, and they didn't go any further.
How many seasons of Full House were there?
40? I don't know.
Speaking of the podcast nicheness spectrum, my friend Spoon has a podcast about betting on tennis, the rather excellently titled Net Worth podcast.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to the Net Worth WTA podcast. That's right, folks, we're back to our roots and talking a little ladies tennis tonight. Spread, unfortunately, is not going to be here. He is out being a good man in the world, taking care of one of his buddies who had a little too much to drink. He's in an Uber right now, getting a car. Jorge, I'm sure that you've had to do that more than once in your life.
If I'm being honest, I'm usually the buddy, more so than...
I know absolutely nothing about betting and next to nothing about tennis. Sorry, I mean next to love. So I asked Spoon to explain it to me.
Yo.
Hey, man, how are you?
Wonderful. How you doing, bud?
Good. Congratulations on getting engaged, man.
Yeah, thank you. I joined the club. I'm a little behind you, but, there.
Everybody's a little behind me.
That's true.
I got a pretty big head start. So, first thing I wanted to tell you is, great podcast name, Net Worth. Hilarious.
It took us a little while to come up with that, but we liked it, and we secretly knew that when we started it as a women's tennis podcast, it might be an NBA podcast, and the pun works the same for both sports. So extremely convenient. We were pretty happy about that.
Oh yeah, I mean you can also get into soccer at some point if you want.
That's true. I'd have to watch soccer and be involved in that. It sounds like a whole bunch of work, but sure.
I'm not a gambling man. I don't really understand how this stuff works. And when I listen to your podcast, I hear a lot of jargon. I don't totally understand all of what it means.
Okay.
So what I was going to ask you to do is give me a basic primer. How does betting on tennis work?
So I'll actually go a step further back, and I'll explain to you how betting even works.
Sure, yeah.
Because, everyone, I think, most of their lives have heard, you're an idiot if you ever bet on anything, you could never possibly make any money. That's not true. It is possible. What you have to do is approach it like you would investing in a stock market or making any sort of purchasing decision. At the end of the day, one of the most difficult parts about betting is the pricing. We being in the United States, we're a country that likes the English system. We use Fahrenheit instead of Celsius. We use inches instead of centimeters and whatnot. So in our own true uniqueness, we have a pricing system that makes little to no sense to anybody. But when you're looking at betting in the United States, you usually see stuff like minus 110. I bet you've heard us say minus 110, minus 150, minus 145, and I have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So what that is, it's a price. Minus 110 means you have to bet $110 to win $100 on whatever the proposition is.
$110 in addition to you win $100 in addition to your original 110, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. You put down 110, you win 100, which means you're returned 210. Now, in a system that makes sense, in Europe they use what's called decimal odds. So instead of minus 110, essentially they would call it 1.9. And what 1.9 means is for every dollar you bet, you get $1.90 back. The dollar you bet plus the 90 cents you won.
So the thing that impacts those plus or minuses or decimals or whatever is the likelihood that something will happen, right?
Exactly. There's an implied probability correlated with every single one of those price points. And the easiest way to think about this is, let's imagine, Zach, I said to you, we're going to flip a coin. We're going to flip this coin 100,000 times, and every time it's heads, I get $1. Every time it's tails, you get $1. You know with pretty reasonable certainty, if we flip a coin 100,000 times, we're going to end up with about the same amount of money we started because it's a true 50-50 proposition. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So what you're trying to do when you're evaluating a gambling wager is look at the implied probability of that price. So, if we were doing a price on that coin flip game I just offered you, the price in U.S. terms would be plus 100, which means you bet $100 to win $100. It's even odds, basically, 1-to-1. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the implied probability of that would be 50-50. When you start to look at other prices, minus 110, so I have to pay a little more than 1-to-1, which means the odds would be above 50%. I think for minus 110, let me just pull this up and do the math here real quick. I think it's just about 55, almost 56%. So what you're trying to do is take a look. It's actually, 52.3%. At the end of the day, you look at all the prices, you figure out what the implied probability of the price is, and then look at the proposition. So if the implied probability is 52.3%, do I think there's a 53% chance it's going to happen? 54, 55? That's close. Maybe I'm not that interested. But let's say I have something I think it's going to happen 65% of the time, and it's only priced like it's going to happen 52.3% of the time. That's a situation where I want to make a wager because I'm playing at an advantage.
So what this is about in terms of tennis then, right, is there's a whole community of people that have already entered into this idea that they're going to bet on tennis. And you are hoping that your knowledge of like a player and their likelihood to perform a certain way is better than like the general public of betting people's idea?
More or less, so at the end of the day, if you're going to become a profitable handicapper and a profitable bettor, what you need to learn how to do is look at the market and figure out kind of what the market is pricing in. Are they looking at statistics? Are they looking at head-to-head matchups? Are they looking at the way the players played the last month versus the last year? And then try to think of little things in your own that maybe they're not thinking of, that maybe the book doesn't have time to build in. One of my favorite things to look at is fatigue. So if someone's played for, 2 or 3 weeks, let's say, they made the semifinals 1 week, won a tournament the second week, and made the quarterfinals the third week. That fourth week, they played a lot of tennis in the last 3 weeks. Their body's going to be broken down, beaten up a little bit. And that's kind of an example of something where you can see an edge, where I can look and say, this price looks a little off to me because so-and-so should be absolutely exhausted. Or you have things like, the week before a Grand Slam being one of the 4 major tournaments, it's the highest payout for players. They're focused on those 4 tournaments all year. So the week or two before then, you see some of the bigger names and more important players kind of looking ahead and more focused on that Grand Slam tournament and not really focused on what they're doing. So you start to find edges that way.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. I feel like once I read something about like certain tennis players being better on like clay versus grass, but that might have just been something in Infinite Jest.
No, that's a huge part of it. So tennis is played on three surfaces. You have clay, which is a soft red, basically dirt. The most of the people who play tennis call it the dirt. Then you have grass, which anybody who's watched Wimbledon, that's what they're playing on there, and it's a nice grass field. And then they have what's called hard court. It's different composite materials that they put together. Most of the time they look blue. But when you look at those, they have a lot of different ways that the ball plays off. So clay, what happens is because the dirt's looser, when the ball hits the clay, it doesn't explode as much. So there isn't as much power, there isn't as much speed put on the ball because the court itself is actually slowing it down. The polar opposite of that is grass. Grass is extremely fast. When you hit a ball on grass, it explodes. There's nothing really to slow it down, and you can also do some fun things that put spin on the ball. And then hard court's kind of in between. It's not nearly as slow as clay. It can be fast, but not as fast as grass, and the spin is kind of in the middle. So you get so for certain players, it's a big advantage. Players with bigger serves who have more power do better on those faster services. Conversely, on clay, the people who tend to do better are the ones who are faster, the ones who are in a little better shape and who have better mobility around the court and the ability to chase balls down. So that is a big thing to take into account.
So does tennis as a sport, does it have more variables than other sports or less? Like, which makes it a better environment for betting? Having a lot of variable possibilities or only having a few?
It depends on how you want to handicap. Tennis is interesting in that it's one person playing. You don't have to look at a team.
Right.
But it's also difficult because it's one human being. You don't know how that one human being is feeling that day. Did they get a bad night's sleep? Did they get some bad news? Are they sick? So if you're more of a qualitative, handicapper, you're doing more watching, you're more looking at the games, paying attention to the players and how they look. It's actually a little bit easier for that when you're looking at one player at a time. When you're approaching team sports, because those human variances kind of get spread out over a larger group, those are easier sports to model from a data perspective because that data tends to be more consistent because you have a little bigger sample size of people that are involved. So what I like about tennis is I do like that mental aspect. There are some good data and some good stats. I do have some models that I use and things to look at, but a lot of it really is just paying attention, knowing who's playing good that week, who's tired, who just got married, whose birthday is that day. That's actually one of the best things to do. You basically fade a tennis player the day of or the day after their birthday because they all go out and party basically. So, they're hungover at 11 o'clock in the morning. If I got somebody in at their birthday yesterday and they have a match at 10 o'clock in the morning the next day, it's a really good spot to fade that player.
See, I would think like a player would be really proud. They're like, it's my birthday. I got to do well.
Some of them I think do, but a lot of them, especially the younger players, actually I know somebody who handicaps tennis mostly based on what he sees on social media. He follows all the players on Snapchat and all the players on Instagram, and if there's pictures of them out of the club at 2 a.m, he's going to go in and bet the other side.
I love that.
Another thing that I know very little about, but maybe don't even want explained to me, is video games. And yet I have recently become a loyal subscriber to a podcast about video games. It's called Super Salty, and the reason that I subscribed is because it's co-hosted by Max Wallace, who you might remember from back in the day, the early seasons of this podcast. It's not going to be, in a second you're going to hear a clip from the show, and there's going to be a British guy's voice. That's not Max. He's the other guy. I know in the early days of the show there were a lot of British voices, and I didn't want to trip anybody up.
Hello, and welcome to the Super Salty Podcast with me, Nilesh Durari, and my co-host.
Oh my god, I can't talk. I butchered that. It was bad. Welcome to the Super Salty Podcast. I am Max. I attempt new theme songs every time, and none of them are going to work. That's sort of the thing. That's what. If I do one that works, then I have to do that one over again. But if I just fuck them up every time, I get to play a new one. That's where I'm at. Welcome to the podcast.
I love Max, and I always appreciate his perspective. When I listen to this show, I'm really interested to see the ways that video game culture penetrates our culture at large. In both the fun ways, like, remember that girl who was selling the bathwater? And also the terrible ways, like I'm just sort of gesturing around generally at misogynistic horror. I'm also horrified, albeit less so, at the way that video games have become remonetized in the internet era. They did a whole episode about the ethical complications around loot boxes, which, if you know what those are, what the fuck?
I feel like it hasn't been that long since I've talked to you, but obviously it has. Like, I've had children and shit since the last time we talked to each other.
Yeah. I have a full-time job now, and I was in another stage of life in another way.
Last time we talked, you were working in the vaping industry, so you got out of there just in time.
It was that long ago. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I worked at a marketing job since then. I was designing there as well, but it was... Yeah, I got out of the vaping industry, my man. That was...
Yeah, good timing there.
Yes.
You got off that ship just in time. So what are you doing now?
I work in local news.
Oh, sick, man.
I didn't know if I told you that or not or what. Yeah.
I feel like I might have gleaned that from social media at some point, but you don't want to make assumptions.
No, I don't I don't know. I don't share all that much as I feel I used to anyway. So.
Yeah, but I'm very perceptive.
This is true. This is true.
And you've always struck me as someone who is anchored to and aware of your community in a really good way. Like, I remember you were talking about West Virginia and the kind of economy and everything. And, that's stuff that I've more recently become more locally aware. And so I appreciate that quality in people. And I think being involved in local news is it seems like a natural fit for you.
Yeah, I guess so. It's definitely filled in a lot of gaps in terms of things I didn't know or didn't understand. I now sort of, and not completely. I feel like I'm closer to understanding the difference between a policeman, a sheriff, a state trooper. I'm like, gosh, I thought they were all just picked whatever name they wanted. Well, I want to wear the green, so I'm trooper today.
Isn't it amazing how much of that shit, I think if you're a reasonably perceptive kid, if you're a reasonably perceptive, intelligent child, you learn early on, I can blow off most of the information coming my way.
Oh, yeah. I learned that unfortunately too soon in my life, I think. Too much of public school was just in a tiny part of my brain I didn't ever use.
Yeah.
Just kept it all back there.
I'm exactly the same way, and I'm realizing now, just how little I know about most stuff. And part of that's being a parent and having to, think about that stuff. And part of it is becoming more aware of my community. And I don't know, it's surprising, because I always assumed I would get dumber throughout my life, right? I would peak somewhere 15, and then just get dumber forever. And it's kind of cool to be, I'm going back up again.
It's neat, and it's interesting to see. It's discouraging in a nice way to say that you discover more. How do I describe this? More icebergs, the tips of different icebergs, and then you notice how much shit is underneath, and you're like, oh shit, I don't know all this. Now I know that I don't know all this.
That's a perfect distillation of what I'm trying to make my podcast about now, the tips of different icebergs. I love that.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
Why is your podcast called Super Salty?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think it has a lot to do with I question that myself. We are natural. How do I say roasters? I feel like Nilesh and I come from families where it's endearing to sort of make fun of each other, poke fun at each other, that kind of thing. And that's how our friendship is. So it just naturally, Salty is kind of having that attitude, I guess.
Every episode of your podcast seems to start with one or the other of you questioning the other's ability to start the podcast. So I appreciate that. How do you know Nilesh?
Man, old YouTube days. I've just known him from, I can't even trace it to a source. One of us watched the other's YouTube channel, and then vice versa. That's how you made friends back then.
Your podcast, it's funny because your podcast is about video games. So you would think that I would have no reason to listen to it beyond just knowing you and wanting to hear what's going on. But I actually think that video games are a very big driver of our culture overall.
Yes, absolutely. It's emerged in a big way. It fulfills a different place in people's lives. I think it's less than something to do. Now it's I think one of the most impressive art forms that exists. So it combines visual art. It combines storytelling, music. Oftentimes, taking input from the viewer, the user, is like crazy. Like almost no other art form involves that. And anticipating what someone might do, you have this character, the person controls them. That's so crazy. It's like so its own thing, and that's what amazes me about it. So I spend all my time on it. I love it.
Now, come to think of it, we were originally talking to John Pernisek when the opportunity presented itself to talk about Spoon and Max's shows. But John's current podcast is also about something I knew very little about, Broadway musicals and the Tony Awards. It strikes me as significant that in the last year or so, my podcast listening habits have shifted entirely. I no longer listen to the comedy and movie podcast that I started with at all. I've moved away from shows hosted by people that I don't know talking about things that I know about, and into shows hosted by people that I do know about things that I don't know about. Is that a sign of personal progress in some way? It's a very, very minor sign of progress, if it is one at all, but I wanted it recorded anyway.
But we were kind of getting to this idea already, that it was a little bit of a blessing in disguise that At the Trailers ended abruptly, because you moved on, you created the Musical Man podcast, and, I mean, I don't see your stats or anything, but it seems like it's doing really well.
I would say I think it's still in its infancy stage. I would certainly like to see the numbers going up. The problem is, it sort of always seems like you get the audience you're going to get, and then it doesn't really expand from there, except for maybe an inch or two over the course of a really long amount of time. But
that's a new internet thing, isn't it? I mean, I'm old enough to remember when your audience for something you would create on the internet would gradually increase.
Right.
And it always did. Like readership of the Twilight blog always went up. But these days, it's like you start, whatever you start with is what you start with, and then you just lose people.
Yeah. You plateau, and the only real difference you're going to see is maybe one or two people, hop on or drop off in any given amount of time. There's not going to be this big spike. You hear a lot of people talk on their highly successful podcasts how, we couldn't have imagined how, when we started this show 6 years ago, nobody was listening, and we always asked ourselves, should we stop? Should we just call it quits? And now, we're just so happy that the show's a huge success. And I'm like, I don't know how you did that, but I have to assume it involved some sort of blood sacrifice, but that's just my theory.
Well, I guess if there's any measure of success about the success of a show, having a stalker, I suppose, would suggest that you're doing something right. Is that how you would characterize the Musical Man parody Twitter account?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people would jump to that pretty quickly. Like, this is someone who they found the show on their own accord. So, this show is in the mix to some degree, so it's reaching people, and in the process, it's reaching weirdos. This is a person who I think at this point has created no less than 6 or 7 different Twitter accounts in an attempt to engage with me and force a conversation out of me where I admit that my opinions, which are not subjectively right or wrong, he wants me, I assume it's a man, he wants me to admit that my opinions are wrong and that they're founded on bias and I am essentially a liar and a fraud. And I consistently block this person because I can't really deal with that kind of conversation. But now it's culminated in this parody account, which is Musical Man, MANN, as in Michael Mann.
I was thinking Manfred Mann.
Blinded by the light.
Oh, okay. Well, let's hope that maybe there are a couple of interests here converging, and that this person isn't just singularly obsessed with my podcast.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're bringing some other things into the mix.
Yeah, you want them to fill a couple hours of the day, something else.
Yeah, I've noticed that this person yells a lot at people regarding baseball, so that's another interest that this person seems to have. Everyone's wrong about baseball. Talk about a curveball. It seems like a very bored person, and they seem to really get a kick out of trying to see what they can get out of me. And it's just frustrating. I don't know how to engage with it anymore because I like taking screenshots of some of this stuff and kind of lightly making fun of it. But that only serves as evidence for this guy that he should keep going. So I don't know. Yeah. I've been an asshole to people on the internet in the past. So I kind of tell myself this is all karma coming back to bite me.
Well, I hope he's listening today.
Yes.
I can use a new listener. And while we're on the subject of subjects that lie outside my wheelhouse, we have frequently and somewhat frustratingly this year on the podcast returned to the subject of affordable housing. It is a pervasive issue, and it affects almost everything else in a lot of communities, not just my own. We first learned about it from Sarah Wrightsman, and when she and I sat down to talk, she told me that she was thinking about starting a podcast too, and then she did, with her co-host, the artist Laura Harper Lake. It's not about affordable housing, it's about creativity. Of course, it's still also a little bit about affordable housing, because as we have seen, it's really hard not to be about that. Anyway, the show's called Creative Guts, and here is a clip.
You still listen to Pandora? I thought you were on the Spotify train.
Very rarely. So I think that Pandora's radio feature is better than Spotify's radio feature. So if I don't necessarily know exactly what song I want to listen to, I will put on Pandora and let it do its thing.
So you are able to just let some other system pick which music you're going to listen to?
Oh, hell yeah.
I am so not like that. I'm so controlling over my Spotify playlists and everything. Whenever it gets to radio, I'm like, no, I don't want to, even if it's a song I love, I don't want to hear it right now.
Spotify radio is really stupid, though. It's bad. It's just not a good, maybe Spotify just doesn't get me.
Wow, who was that handsome sounding man they were interviewing? I listen to this show every week, and it's a double whammy for me because not only do I get to hear what my friends are thinking about, I also get to meet new artists and activists in almost every episode. I might even steal some of them to be on my show. Then again, Sarah and Laura have this very fancy setup for their podcast, and, I show up to talk to people with 2 beat-up old microphones that date back to my high school punk band days and a dirty New Yorker tote bag full of loose AA batteries, so I should really try to get to these people first. In the spirit of returning to affordable housing all the time, here is a little bit more from my original interview with Sarah. So to catch you up again, when we talk about affordable housing in New Hampshire, we tend to always end up talking about children and schools. The budget in New Hampshire is pretty tight and funded more or less entirely by property taxes, and people believe that more children in schools mean their property taxes will necessarily go up. Maybe you've heard a grandparent complain about this, but it's not true. And that's kind of the basis for what we're talking about here.
I like to think that the tide's turning on this a little bit because a lot of schools have declining enrollments, and there's been some, mostly rumors, I think, about schools closing. Somebody did just recently close a school. I don't remember who it was, though. But I just want to throw some, data out there because I think it's important to myth bust this. So there was a study commissioned by Russ Tebow from Applied Economic Research in Laconia, New Hampshire, and he did a study for New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority that demonstrated that for every unit of workforce housing or every unit of new housing, you're really only getting 0.4 kids. So that's super contrary to this myth that for every unit of housing, you're getting 2 new kids in the school system. So if you have, a 40 unit apartment building, you're getting more like 18 kids, not 80. And I think part of my confusion with this argument and why this still persists despite what we know and despite declining enrollments is that I can't imagine that the per pupil cost of adding a couple of kids is really that extravagant unless you were adding 40 kids or 20 kids and you had to open up a new classroom and hire a new teacher. I don't see how adding 3 kids would really set that over.
Yeah, the whole system is already set up, and yeah, there's when I was a kid, it was 25 kids in a class, and in a lot of places in New Hampshire now it's 12 or 16. So what's 3 more?
Right, exactly. Except, so I'm thinking this is true, right? And the tide's turning on this. And then recently, a town that I won't name because I won't slander them, it's my hometown, got all up
Which
in
you did say
arms.
earlier for people that were paying attention.
Ooh, no, you don't. No. Oh no.
Wait, no, not where you live now.
Not where I live now.
Oh, never mind. You didn't then.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's a secret. Nobody knows. So this town where I grew up, they're getting 5 units, rental units. Like, that is so little. This is a pretty rural town, but they're freaking out because they think that it is going to lead to an increase in students with disabilities, which are more expensive for the school system. And I don't really see the link between like 5 units of rental housing automatically equals there's going to be 5 students with disabilities?
Yeah, so that's crazy. This is what eventually happens with everything, right? Like, it's a layer of fear on top of another layer of fear that's all made up. It's like the illegal immigrants are going to come to my house and also disconnect my cable or something. It's like, first you have to prove that they're going to come to your house in the first place. Second of all, who said that they don't want you to watch Fox News?
Some weird logic jumps.
Yeah. So that's what happens though, right? When this stuff has been around long enough. But I feel like I didn't really recognize that it was all about kids. It's all about kids because kids increase property taxes because schools are the most expensive thing. Like, towns spend more money on schools than they do on firefighters and police. And in New Hampshire, that's the only thing we spend any money on at all.
Right.
So it's just schools, firefighters, police. So you got to pick one of the 3, and the one that we picked is schools. And the thing that we get scared of is too many kids. And the only thing we could possibly think of that controls the number of kids is affordable housing.
Right.
Workforce housing.
Right.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't say affordable housing.
It's all right. I said affordable housing earlier. I caught myself doing it.
But it is like, when you lay out the argument like that, which is the things that I'm trying to do, you really do see it as this logical leap to a logical leap to a logical leap. And everyone's starting from all the way back here like, this is true. And they should really be thinking about it from the beginning of this flight path.
Right.
It's like the movie Batman versus Superman.
I didn't see it.
Well,
I didn't understand why they were fighting each other.
That's the thing. It doesn't make any sense. They had to start with, why would Batman and Superman be mad at each other, come up with a reason, then they worked their way backwards from that reason. That's an okay way to write, the first draft of a story, right? But then you have to go, wait a minute. We started back from the end, and we worked our way backwards. We have to make sure it makes sense forwards.
Yep, that's spot on. Yeah, the silly thing about it, too, is that we are somehow mistaken in thinking that, older people don't use services that cost property taxes. So, for example, if you put in a 62-plus community, an age-restricted housing community, aren't those older people using, EMT, police, fire services at higher rates than younger people?
Yeah, and they're driving on the roads, and they're hitting the sidewalk a lot. that has to get rebuilt often.
Yeah, young people never do that.
Well, yeah. Only as we hit that when we're going over that parallel parking curve.
Yep.
It's a temporary blip. It's not like on the sine curve of traffic accidents. It's like a little bit when you're 16, and then when you are over 60, it goes way up.
Yep, that's funny.
I've been in the car a couple of times with my wife's grandmother's husband, Bill, and it is the scariest thing in the world.
Yep.
It's so scary.
Yep.
And you're
one of those too.
You're like, I gotta call the cops on this guy. I don't want to do it. I want to call the cops. I'm not a narc, but for the safety of the people that he almost plows down every day.
Yep.
I don't. Yep. It's like what I try to imagine, what his field of vision is like.
My grandmother's 93 and she's totally blind, and she's finally like, all right, fine, I'll stop driving. Okay, good, Grim.
Yeah, I'm glad we can get a little bit of just old-fashioned old person bashing in at the end here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Have to.
I want to talk to Sarah and Laura about their podcast, but since we cover such similar subjects and work in a similar region and really just have a lot in common, I have way more questions for them than we really have space for today, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so back when we talked to Sarah a couple of episodes ago, we also talked to our old friends Steve and Becky from the Global Aquaculture Alliance. They're the advocacy and sort of regulatory group that works to improve the reputation of fish farming. Anyway, one thing that I didn't mention is that when I went to go talk to them, I met them at a brand new and very fancy office that included, among other things, a podcast studio. Of course, we didn't use it for our interview because somebody was on a very important and very loud call with a client in the next room, but still, it looked really nice. We talked in a conference room.
So the podcast studio, what are you podcasting? Is there like a GAA weekly show I can subscribe to in the Apple Store?
And I remember asking if they were doing like a weekly podcast, sort of jokingly. Like, even though I'd seen the podcast studio with my own eyes, it seemed totally crazy to me that the GAA would have one. And as Steve started answering me, I kind of had to adjust in my head, like, oh, we're not riffing right now. It's a real thing.
Yeah. Well, it's really, I think what you'd like about it is it's very approachable. I think, like the film initiative, it's very approachable. It's geared toward an audience that may be unfamiliar with aquaculture. So it's not very industry specific or very B2B. So
it feels good to me because, like, a couple of years ago, nobody even really knew what a podcast was.
Exactly.
And now, like, businesses and organizations are getting in on it. It's like, it feels like an endorsement of the medium, you know?
The show's called Aquademia, another great title. And Steve and Becky don't host it. They're busy enough. But it's very amiable and informative, and here's a clip.
I'm Sean O'Loughlin.
I'm Justin Grant.
And I'm Maddie Cassidy.
And today we have a really cool episode for you. Just like every week we say, hey, this is a really cool episode.
They're all cool.
They're all really cool. And this one's especially cool because it involves dried meats, which is one of my favorite things.
So as far as the GAA films and everything, what are you working on lately?
So we have actually dialed it back a little bit in the sense that we were producing 3 to 4 films a year, and we've only had it for 2 years. So we are on our 6th film, and this one will be in Chile. It's sort of central, not central, central southern on the coast. That didn't make sense. Sorry.
Well, it's a skinny
end of the
country,
day,
so.
yeah, I know. Like, it is sort of central.
It's that's right.
It's not as far south as you can go, but
Two-thirds,
it's more southern.
2/3, 3/4.
Yeah, 2/3, 3/4 of the way down. In Puerto Montt and Kilauea Island are 2 areas that we're looking at to feature the story of an individual. And we're in pre-production right now, so I don't know too much yet, but an individual who has had experience with both the aquaculture sector in this one community and the wild caught sector in the same community. So showing both sort of sides of the story.
Yeah, in one person. I like it.
This is a very different film for us because it'll be through the eyes of just one person. We've always had, families or groups of people, multiple perspectives. So it'll just be this one person. And we want to show that there is a little bit of clash there. Like, it's a really interesting place where, I just learned the other day that most of the salmon that they farm down there, this isn't necessarily a very positive thing, but it doesn't go to the local community. If locals don't eat Chilean salmon, they could get it if it were on like the black market, if it were being sold illegally in a market, but they can't buy it for themselves. It's all exported. So that's an interesting proposition.
It is. I was just talking about it.
Yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic down there, but it drives so much of the economy. So it's important.
Right.
Like, it has to be there.
But there's that disconnect because they're not consuming the product.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And then the wild fisheries are having a tough time because of stock declining. Some climate change issues are happening with some of the wild caught. It doesn't pay well for the fishermen, so they're being sort of pushed out to do other kinds of work, and a lot of times that's aquaculture, because aquaculture is a job, it's a role. You punch the clock, you get a paycheck, it's very stable. And if your goal is to feed your family, what are you going to do? So while you may lose some of the romance of heritage fishing and the pride in being a heritage fisherman, you exchange that for security. And so that is a story that is taking place down there more often than not. So we're going to go figure it out.
Those are some very universal themes, you know? Even people who have never looked at the ocean can, like, relate to that idea.
Yeah, exactly.
So... we went to this Leadership Seacoast party on Thursday, and the band that was there started playing The Wait, and I really wanted to like run up and just grab the mic and start doing the crazy chest to follow me verse, like you did at our anniversary party.
I was gonna say, an appearance verse.
That's the song. That's the verse you run in.
It's the song that you run in on.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so this is the second verse of The Wait, and I would say that to me, this is like it's about being a good friend, but it's about like the way that can backfire on you.
I think one thing that I felt like I should have, when we were talking about the song initially, I kind of was like feeling like I should have said that I think that the song itself is just about being like the curse of being a good person.
Yeah.
And like I think that the verses do seem separated and different, but like I think that's kind of I think that's the connecting theme. Verses about being a good person that's taken advantage of.
So like in this particular verse, our narrator sees their friend Carmen. The friend is walking with the devil, so they try to get their friend away from the devil, and technically they succeed. But Carmen's like, why don't you hang out with my friend the devil?
Okay, let me take that in a little bit. I might go too far here, all right?
Okay.
But here's my thought on that. A lot of the times when you're trying to help your friends that are troubled out, you are dragged down with them.
Yeah.
Again, the curse of being a good person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's this, as simply put as possible, is trying to get your friend away from the devil and you're dragged in yourself. I think that anyone who has ever had a friend who struggled with any sort of addiction or anything like that, I think that this verse is about that.
Yeah.
I had 2 different friends pass away this week under different circumstances, but I don't know. I had heard a figure that I don't know how you could possibly measure, but that our generation attends more funerals than weddings.
Huh.
And that sounded fake to me. I was like, that sounds like a skewed number.
I don't know how you would measure it, but I mean...
But like, it's a very real thing going down. Maybe I took us off point here.
No, I don't think that's wrong. No, I think
that's
based on the point you started with, that's where we've ended up.
Well, I think that I often struggle with like the curse of being a good person thing. I often feel like I'm walked all over because I'm like, nicer than most people.
I have that feeling sometimes, but I always, when I get that way, and there was a time pretty recently, I went through this period where there was some stuff going on where I was feeling like a situation that I put myself in was not the greatest situation to have put myself in.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of just hung on to that feeling for a long time because I wanted it to not be true. And I kind of just
I kind of just kept it in my head until it wasn't true anymore. And now after, like, because, like, you know, people that you know don't treat you well, you wait long enough and they treat you well again, and you're like, well, maybe that was just a blip. And it's hard to know, was I wrong when I thought I was wrong? Or am I wrong now that I think I'm right?
My brother Morgan has a show now, too. And it's not a podcast, technically. It's a video series. But it's so centered around music and memory that it counts as a podcast in my book. And, you know, he's my brother, and I really like it, and I want to talk about it today. His show's called Tuesdays with Morgan, and we kind of seamlessly transitioned into talking about it during our talk about the weight. And here I am interrupting that seamless transition with my introduction, so I'll let you get back to it.
I definitely feel like one of the things that I'm trying to do with the show is like talk about the idea of like and I don't know if it's the sickness and everything took me through a pretty strong transformation on like life outlook.
Yeah.
But one of those things is about like putting good energy into the world. And I think that I am easily able to identify people who do that. I've been just absolutely adoring High Maintenance.
Isn't that such a great show?
And I feel like Ben Sinclair is one of those people.
Yeah, like putting positive energy out into the world person?
Yeah.
I agree.
And I think that that's important, especially in today's day and age, but just in general. I feel like those people I am easily able to identify as like a comrade, you know, brother in arms of like, we're trying to put out good energy into the world, you know? So, and that's like if there was a thesis statement for Tuesdays with Morgan, that's it. We're putting out good energy into the world.
I think you're doing a good job of doing that, and at the same time kind of documenting your transformation that you were talking about.
Yes.
Like piece by piece, element by element, talking about things that happened to you, places that you have been, where you are now, and then also like the people in your life.
I very much appreciate that. Even if you're the only person who has picked up on that, of the 80 people that watch it a week, I am happy with you taking that away.
Well, yeah, I think that when you're doing something like the way Tuesdays with Morgan works, after you've watched a couple episodes, it's clear that you're like constructing something. You know? And you don't even necessarily know what you're going to build in the end, because why would you?
Yeah.
But you know at least, like, you know what this wall looks like, and then you know what this wall looks like, and you're kind of doing that piece by piece. So it does feel like something is, from episode to episode, something is being built. And I also see, because I think about things in terms of video, the other thing I see being built is your sense of how to use video to express things that you heretofore expressed just musically.
Yes.
Like you're learning to incorporate the visual stuff into the same way that you express yourself musically. Like they feel like the same, you know, they feel like the same. They feel like now you're just using video as another instrument in your band.
Great. That's what I want.
Yeah.
That maybe there should be an episode where you just explain what Tuesdays with Morgan should be. You know,
everybody should have that for a show. A show where another person explains what it is.
I look forward to Morgan's videos every week. I'm always surprised by them, and particularly was surprised this week because the episode was about me. He featured some songs that are very significant to me, some of which we've talked about on here, and he said some very sweet things. His show and the Bright Eyes podcast that we do, and his recent wedding. All of that, it's prompted me to think about our relationship a lot. And I don't think I'll ever be able to fully express how important he is to me, but I did try, sort of, during my best man speech at his wedding back in August.
Morgan and Sarah's romance, it began, like so many great love stories, on Instagram. It's a tale as old as time. Boy meets girl. Boy strategically likes girl selfies. Girl slides into the DMs, happily ever after. Okay, I might be oversimplifying that a little bit. I believe, actually, it was Tim Stone that introduced them. You will forgive my confusion, though, because normally when Tim Stone says he wants you to meet a very special lady, he means, you know, a gun. It's good to see you, Tim. It's been a long time. It's really great. You know, actually, two of my favorite drummers are here tonight, Tim Stone and Ryan Lewis. In fact, that's actually why my cousin Colby's fiance, Pat Griffin, couldn't be here today. All three of my favorite drummers aren't allowed to be in the same place at the same time. It's a designated survivor type situation. If this tent collapses, the music industry will never recover. My favorite musician of all time, full stop, is also here tonight. He's the one getting married, folks. I like to tell people that Morgan and I would be friends even if we weren't brothers. Which is true, although it's kind of a cheat. We have very deeply shaped each other's taste and personalities over the years, which would have been hard to do if we didn't share a room for 15-something years. That's a long time to share one room. I guess a series of different rooms at different houses in one basement. But it was absolutely a two-way street. Morgan shaped me just as much as I shaped him. People often think that he's the older brother because, he's taller and people are stupid. We're not trees. It doesn't work that way. But, it always has felt more like an equal partnership than an older-younger thing. Obviously, as is natural, we eventually stopped sharing a room and grew up separately for a while, but now he lives close to me again, and I feel so lucky for the opportunity to continue to be influenced and shaped by him now. A couple of days ago, my son heard that I was going over to Morgan's place, and he insisted on coming along. He started chanting, "Morgan, Morgan, Morgan." I gotta tell you, that felt so good. Morgan and I have a special bond. It's one that I hope that my son and his new brother will have with each other as well as with their uncle and their new aunt. Arlo loves you too, Sarah. He's just still working on saying your name. He doesn't have the S sounds down yet. Anyway, the point is, I love you, Morgan. I love you, Sarah. I'm so happy that you have found each other. I'm so happy that Morgan gets somebody as lovely and fun and interesting and supportive. You deserve it. So, cheers. I lost my glass. Here we go. I knew I needed to bring one over. Let's raise a glass to everybody who worked so hard over the last 48 hours to put this wedding together. The cooks, the organizers, everybody. But most of all, let's raise a glass to Morgan and Sarah, the couple of the hour, in the next several hours, hopefully. I hope nobody's planning on heading home yet. All right. Thank you.
So, okay, let's recap. John Pernisek's show is called The Musical Man with one N, not two. Two N's, that's his stalker. Max Wallace can be heard on Super Salty, and Spoon can be heard on Net Worth. Sarah and Laura's show is called Creative Guts. The Global Aquaculture Alliance's show, Aquademia, is there for anybody who wants their attitudes about seafood improved. Tuesdays with Morgan is midway through Season 1 and can be found on the YouTube channel The Mild Revolution. I'm very lucky to know these people. I'm very lucky to have these talented people and many others in my life. And I just wanted to take an episode to recognize that, both publicly and to myself. In recent weeks, I've hit a couple of snags in my journey of, self-reinvention or whatever you want to call it. Took some hits, watched a couple of very exciting new doors start to close on me. Suffice it to say that when you finally realize that you could be doing more, it becomes really hard to not do that. To feel stuck where you are instead of where you should be. But a career is not the only measure of success. The people that you know, and the people who know you, whose work and life you can celebrate, that's the most important measure of success. The last thing that I want to share with you today is a little one-off podcast that was produced by my friend Paige. Last year at me and Christy's 10th anniversary party, she went around and talked to our friends and family and made the 10 minutes of audio that I'm going to play for you now. It's one of the best gifts that a friend has ever given me. It has kind of a slow and quiet intro, so do not adjust that dial. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
I met them candlepin bowling. It was quarter night.
Yeah.
Candlepin bowling for a quarter.
First time I met Zach, and he was talking about pizza, I believe.
I met Christy, I think, in study hall, actually.
George Noyes and I started a Jesus band, and Zach was the drummer.
I was like, what the hell's going on here? But the first time I met Zach, so I had to go and try out to be in the band.
They very excitedly gave me hugs, and I felt very welcome and wonderful.
And used to come with Karen and rescue me when I had twins. She was just younger, right? How old was she?
She was 16.
She was 16?
Yeah.
I thought she was younger than that. They used to come over once or twice a week, and they used to stay the night. Zach used to read stories.
I was so young. I've kind of almost known them for not really known, but they've been around forever. And then I got to know them better as I was older. One thing that always stuck out to me, for the first time ever, Zach, was this one picture of him reading to me, and I was just sitting on his lap looking at him, and I was bawling my eyes out. And he was reading with me, and I remember he made this really funny picture of it.
It's a good little dog.
Something, and then it just died.
Come here.
So it's it all went downhill really fast. But it has since been fine for the last year. So yeah.
It was so long ago that it's one of those that you don't actually even remember when you met. Yes. I just remember being really young and hanging out at this house with Stretch Armstrong toys.
He had horn-rimmed glasses on, and I was very taken.
That is sexy. I can see why you'd get into that.
I was like, I don't remember. I think I didn't meet Christy until a Sacco trip. Sacco canoeing trip.
Yeah, it's Sacco. I feel like Zach and Christy started dating almost the same time that I became friends with Zach. It couldn't have been that many months apart. And then, so that must have been near 8th grade. And then they were just always together.
Go have some of this right now.
What is it?
What is it? It is amazing.
Oh, I gotta go sing another verse.
I brought a potato pie.
It's my wedding day. I'll have some of that. So Jordy, take a shit.
Jory definitely.
Yep.
Jory!
All right.
Simon!
Good God. Good for you. Good for you. Okay. Anyway, so. Yeah, so I was at Dean's house without Morgan because he was at work, and they showed up for a surprise visit. And I remember hearing their voices, and I knew who they were because, pictures, whatever. And I heard their voices, and I was like, oh, I should go say hi or something. So I walked down and I see them, and I was like, oh, hi. And then Dean introduced us, and it was kind of weird, but very natural. And I remember being kind of intimidated by both of them because they're both amazing people who have all this cool creativity and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. I was in a band with Christy's brother. It was a Christian rock band. I didn't know that when I joined, but I just wanted to play the drums in a band. And I made a lot of good friends. And anyway, me and her brother were becoming pretty good friends. And he's picking me up for practice one day, and there was somebody in the front seat, and it was his sister. I don't know. I remember it was either at that band practice or the next one or something. She came up to me while I was playing the drums. She told me that I had really pretty eyes.
The first time I think he noticed me was one time when I said that I really liked his eyes.
And I was I was in.
He was 15 and I was 16. And me and my brother were going to go to his band practice, but he had to pick up the drummer first. So we went and parked up at Kihonka, and then this guy got in the car, and I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And then things changed. We ended up going to homecoming to kind of stick it to another person, and then that was our first date. That was actually the day we got married 6 years later.
The time that I knew it was like a thing was like we were at a high school football game together, and she like called we were like, we needed to get like a ride home. Like, this is how young we were. And she like called my dad to tell him to come pick us up. And I remember just like watching her call my dad, and I was like, oh yeah, there's something serious happening here.
It's crazy that it's been 10 years. Like, that makes me feel really old, I guess. But yeah, I'm just really happy to be able to celebrate their 10-year anniversary. And yeah, I think pretty much one of the only things I regret in my life is not being able to go to their wedding. And I'm just really happy that we've reconnected and that we're friends again and we get to hang out again, and that's just really great.
I haven't done anything for 10 years, so it's amazing, and it is a strong commitment, and I think it's wonderful.
Here's hoping for 10 more.
I looked it up. 10 years is aluminum or tin, and Morgan and I were joking that we should bring them just a roll of tin foil. Or aluminum foil. It covers both bases. Which is it? Who knows? Keeps the mystery alive in the marriage, you know? They say that to me.
Zach and Christy make the most amazing team. They don't need my advice. Let's just say that.
They're awesome. They're such a cute couple. They're so sweet and smart together. They really complement each other.
They make some cute babies.
Well, one baby.
I really felt like, this guy is so weird. He's like so off the wall. But, you know, when I think about it, I'm pretty off the wall myself. I feel like he really met us with all the same intensity that we carry about life and about family, which makes perfect sense. Happy 10th anniversary. You guys are awesome.
you by tomorrow noon. But you call this red tape at a dark